So I saw Eternals and I didn't really care for it, which is really disappointing. The only other movie I've seen from this director is Nomadland, which I wasn't really a huge fan of either. I think it's a really well made movie and I think the acting's really good, but I can't really say I really cared for the emotional core of the story itself. Like, yeah, I get where it was coming from, experiencing the life of a nomad, whatever, but I just didn't really care for it and I found myself mostly bored throughout the film. Maybe if they spent more time on the story than they did on the visuals, then I would have liked it a lot more. I feel like the same thing sort of applies to this movie. There was a lot of potential for a much more emotional and character-driven story rather than a much more action-filled, and they just kind of lost me. When the movie was originally announced, I was just wondering who are the Eternals and why are we supposed to care? When the trailer came out, I was just wondering who are the Eternals and why are we supposed to care? When the movie came out, I definitely did not know who the Eternals were, and I sure as hell did not care. This movie definitely tries to go for something much more new and artistic, but the thing is, it just barely tries to be a good movie because it's trying too hard to be so different from the rest of the MCU. I guess before we get into the more negative side of things, we can go over the few good things that this movie has going for it. There's definitely a lot less action in this movie, but whenever they did have action, it was pretty entertaining. I would be lying if I said the acting wasn't the best I've seen in the MCU in quite a long time. And the CGI in this movie was actually pretty impressive, and there wasn't a single shot where it looked somewhat fake. And it definitely looked a lot better than whatever this was.
Don't do it! This was fun! No!
And much like Nomadland, I definitely think the cinematography was really impressive.
It ended when you said goodbye.
I feel like if they really wanted to, they could have just dumped this movie into two parts rather than trying to do so much at once in this 2.5 hour movie. Trying to set up so much lore and the future of the MCU and explaining why the Eternals weren't there and trying to do all of that just makes the story feel really rushed and just kind of confusing and really just hard to care for the emotional core of the story if you barely really get to know what the characters are or who they are and all of this. And the fucking timeline is all over the place and it really does not help the movie at all because we barely really get to see the characters in action when they're just dumping all of this onto us at once, which yet again would have been fixed if they had split the story in two fucking halves. Walked out of this movie just not really caring for the Eternals and not even entirely knowing who they all are. Doesn't really help since not a lot of the characters are really introduced until later into the movie, and a lot of them just didn't really work for me and their characters felt way too underdeveloped. I feel like there's just way too many characters to introduce at once and it just feels like a lot of them are just being left out and we don't really get to see who they are as characters. And this movie is also just kind of boring at times and really uninteresting. And I feel like the movie knows this, which is why they felt the need to shove in so many unnecessary jokes. Also, there is a very certain character in this movie whose name I do not remember nor do I care, who is extremely unfunny that it's actually kind of killing the film. Whenever this movie even attempts to shove in jokes, it just makes the film more embarrassing, if anything, and it just ends up making the jokes feel super out of place. There's literally a scene in this movie with said character that is just practically screaming in your face. This is supposed to be the funny part now, because we always need to have the funny part in Marvel movies. Said character was so unfunny that I literally never want to see them in a Marvel movie again, which, judging by the reviews of this movie, I don't really think we'll be seeing these characters anytime soon. There's a plot twist that happens in this film and I did not care because I barely even knew who the character was. Part of the charm of the MCU movies, especially the team up ones like the Avengers and of course James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy films, is that the interactions with the characters are always supposed to be so special and you're supposed to view them as if they're a family. And we just really don't get that here. I wish there were just kind of more an entertaining bond between these actors, but they couldn't even really do that. I feel like The Eternals really could have been an easy fix, and I can think of 2 other 2021 movies that did what this movie tried to do, but way better. I feel like this movie really wanted to go for a much more character-driven story, and I think it could have just done that if it wasn't held back by the constant exposition. I can tell the director really wanted to make a much more different MCU movie, and she definitely did that, but I feel like she didn't make a good one, like at all. I think the message in this movie is actually pretty beautiful, and I really think it could have worked if they just tweaked the script a little bit. They should have just split the story in 2 halves and given these characters more time to shine together and given them a lot more interactions. Instead, we just got characters talking to each other for 2.5 hours, and it barely even gives us a reason to care about any of it. I really just didn't give a fuck about the Eternals, and I do not care whatever they have in the future for them, if they even have anything. This and Nomadland are both good examples of style over substance. Both of these movies are really well made movies, but I don't really think they're well written movies. It doesn't really do anything to make us care about the characters in either of them, and I just found myself mostly bored through both of them. Eternals was definitely a very good attempt at something new for the MCU, but I can't really say it succeeded all that well. The acting and the CGI is pretty nice, but the writing was definitely its biggest problem. It just tried to do way too much at once, and I found myself mostly just bored, and the movie just really felt overall dull and really forgettable. I didn't care about the characters going in, and I still do not care about the characters coming out of the movie twice. Would I recommend this movie is really entirely up to you. If it's not banned in your country for being a bit too gay, and if you think this looks pretty cool, then I say go check it out. If you don't care about this movie, then you probably will feel the same way coming out of it. Eternals gets a 5 out of 10. It was a little too woke for me. I didn't really care for it, and I don't think I'll be watching it anytime soon. If you want to hear my thoughts on more movies or 2021 movies, check out my Letterboxd link in the description below. Or you can just wait till December, where I'll be ranking 75 different 2021 movies. And I already have segments for those being edited as we speak. Yet again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys all next time, where I'll hopefully be talking about either Shang-Chi or Dune.